You are under my control. You are in my power. I've got my eye on you. Woo! Hi everyone, welcome. Now, that's what it may have felt like for all those countries in Eastern Europe, East Germany, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, all those sorts of countries felt as if they were controlled by the all-powerful eye of the Soviet Union. That's what it had been like for many of those people. But if you remember our previous video, I was talking about Mikhail Gorbachev, and I said he changed things. Well, ladies and gentlemen, in today's video, we're going to look at the huge change that's happened in the Eastern European countries from 1988, 89, 1990. Okay? That's what this video is all about. Now, if you remember, Gorbachev wanted to reform and change communism. He did not want to get rid of it. He thought if we modernize, people will still want to be communist. That did not happen. In Eastern Europe, things changed totally. Now, if you remember the Brezhnev Doctrine, when Brezhnev was leader of Russia, the Soviet Union, he said, well, we have the right to go into other countries and make sure that they stay communist. In our previous video, I talked about something called the Sinatra Doctrine. Gorbachev saying, no, we are going to allow countries to go their own way. I did it my way, not the communist way. He's saying to the countries, do it your way. What did they decide to do when they were given that chance? Well, think back through some of the videos hopefully you've had a look at. Hungary, 1956. Hungary starts to challenge Soviet Union. I think we want to go our way. Khrushchev sent in the tanks and crushed it, stopped it. Czechoslovakia, 1968. The Prague Spring, the Czechs saying, oh, I think we want to do something slightly differently. Brezhnev sent in the tanks and crushed it. 1979, Afghanistan, the Soviet army was sent in to control Afghanistan. All good examples of control from the Soviet Union. The Sinatra Doctrine changed that. Now, can you remember who was president of America in the 1980s, the late 1980s? Bonus points for anybody who said President Ronald Reagan. Now, as we know, Reagan had hated communism. He spoke about it as the evil empire. But he begins to form a bit of a relationship with Gorbachev. 1987, Reagan made a very, very famous speech. He traveled to West Germany. He traveled to West Berlin. He traveled to the Brandenburg Gate, right by the Berlin Wall, a symbol of the division between Western Europe and Eastern Europe. He traveled to the gate, to the wall, and he made a very famous speech. And in that speech, he directly addressed Gorbachev. He spoke to him directly in front of the world. And he said, Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall, the Berlin Wall. 1987. Now, at the time, people thought, oh, that will never happen. The Berlin Wall was put up in the year I was born, 1961. No comments, please. So, what was going to happen? Well, Gorbachev, following the Sinatra Doctrine, he says, look, I'm going to withdraw tanks, troops, aircraft from Eastern Europe. Remember, cost. It was hugely expensive, and Gorbachev wanted to use the money to reform the USSR and improve it. So, with the Soviet Union sending a message, maybe we're not going to control you, what would those countries in Eastern Europe do? Poland was the first. Solidarity, a trade union, they've been involved in some protests earlier in the 80s. Solidarity, free elections in Poland, and the first non-communist prime minister of an Eastern European country since the Cold War was set up. Poland 1989 was the first step of a country saying, okay, we've got the Sinatra Doctrine, we can go our own way, we choose to leave communism, we choose to move away from the USSR. Poland was the first. Other countries looked at that. Hungary. Now Hungary says, whoa, look what Poland are doing. Gorbachev's given us the freedom. Okay. Hungary, communist Hungary, opened its border with non-communist Austria. This was very important. It was symbolic. Because for the first time, probably since almost the Second World War finished, there was a hole in the Iron Curtain. Okay? This idea of Eastern Europe completely separate from Western Europe. Hungary opens its borders. So it was perfectly possible for people in Hungary to travel into Austria and then on to other parts of Western Europe. Well, people in East Germany see this. They've been split from friends and family since the Berlin Wall went up. So some people in East Germany say, aha, we can travel into Hungary and then we can get through into the West. And then we can go and visit West Germany and see our friends and our family. There's a whole opening up. There's an opportunity. Well, the East German governments aren't very happy. They're communists. They don't want that. So they turn to their leader. They turn to the man in charge, Gorbachev, and say, please help. Stop this. Gorbachev says, Sinatra Doctrine. No, I'm not getting involved. Wow. This was a huge change, a huge step forward. I'm not going to stop people. Within a few weeks, a few months, East Germany, millions of people are out on the streets protesting. They go to the Berlin Wall. They see it as a symbol. We want to get the wall down. Before, if they'd have approached the wall, they'd have been shot by the guards. But now the East German Communist guards, they don't know what to do. They're waiting for instructions. But there's no leadership from USSR. Sinatra Doctrine. Sort it out yourself. The 9th of November, 1989, 28 years after the Berlin Wall was built, the people of Berlin started to tear it down, started to make holes in the Berlin Wall so that people could go through. 1989, many people say this was a hugely symbolic moment. Here, finally, we get the start of the end of the Cold War. And here's a piece. Now, to us, it just looks like a little piece of stone. If you look carefully, you might see it's got pink on it. That was from paint, from the graffiti that people used to dare to put on the Berlin Wall. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a tiny piece of the Berlin Wall. A little bit of history just there. Now, have you ever lined up, when you were a child, lined up loads and loads of dominoes? What happens if you push the first domino? Brrr. Yes, they knock onto one another and all the dominoes fall over. It was a bit like that in Eastern Europe. First of all, we had Poland, then we had Hungary, then we had East Germany. Other countries then looked around and said, right, we'll do that. In Czechoslovakia, November 1989, the communist government in Czechoslovakia resigns. There are free elections. A non-communist takes over, a man called Havel. They have free elections in 1990. An anti-communist alliance of parties win. This is repeated in other countries, Bulgaria, even in Romania. Romania had been held by a brutal government. People who acted very harshly and killed and tortured their own Romanian people. Now the leader of the Romanian communists was a man called Nicolae Ceausescu. Now, at first, when he sees all this going on in other countries, he says, well, it's not going to happen here. I've got my secret police and I'm going to stay in charge. But no, the police rebelled against him. There was fighting on the streets. And in the end, Ceausescu was arrested by the people. And on Christmas Day, 1989, he was shot by firing squad, by his own people. That shows the level of change that was going on in Eastern Europe in the late 1980s. Into 1990, East and West Germany are reunited. They merge again to be one country, the way they had been before World War II. This again is another step showing that the Cold War is beginning to end. Tension between the two superpowers of USA and USSR is easing dramatically. The world was a happier place. Wow, look what is happening. Under the leadership of Gorbachev, the new Germany joined NATO. NATO, the gang of Western Europe against the communists. New Germany joins NATO. 1991, the Warsaw Pact, the countries of Eastern Europe, their gang with USSR, that's dissolved. Warsaw Pact was no more. 1991, communism was ending in Eastern Europe because of the Sinatra Doctrine and the leadership of Gorbachev. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if he's given up control in Eastern Europe, what I wonder was going to happen back at home in the Soviet Union, in the USSR? What's going to happen to Gorbachev and communism? Well, here's a new man, Boris Yeltsin. Gorbachev, Yeltsin. Wow. Things are about to change in the USSR. And what happened next? I'll tell you in our final video on the Cold War. Coming soon, Gorbachev, Yeltsin. Hope it's been interesting. You are under my control. Woo! Learn your historical facts. Woo! See you soon. All the best.